Behind the success you see on Pawn Stars, Rick Harrison's life has been full of problems, including family fighting in court, betrayal, and a death that deeply hurt his family. While millions of people watch him on TV making deals and sharing interesting facts about history, there's a much more complicated story behind the scenes. His journey from a sick child to a famous businessman hasn't been easy, and recent years have brought some of his biggest challenges yet. To really understand Rick Harrison's hard times, we need to look back at his early life, when his biggest problems weren't about money or legal issues, but about his health. Rick Harrison, who started and stars in the famous TV show Pawn Stars, had a really tough start in life. He was born on March 22, 1965, in Lexington, North Carolina, into a working-class family that struggled to make ends meet. His parents worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table. When Rick was just 8 years old, something happened that would change his whole life. He started having really bad epilepsy seizures. These weren't just regular seizures. They were so severe that doctors weren't sure if he would be able to live a normal life. His parents spent almost all their savings trying different doctors and medicines to help him. The seizures made his childhood very different from other kids, and they shaped who he would become as a person. His mom later said she used to sit by his bed every night, worried that he might have a seizure in his sleep. These seizures really hurt him, both in his body and his mind. In his life storybook, Rick talked about how scary these seizures were, saying they would keep him in bed for weeks. During the seizures, his muscles would get really tight, and he would bite his tongue badly. Because he was sick so much, he couldn't play with other kids and spent a lot of time alone in bed. To deal with being lonely and scared, Rick started reading lots of books. He would spend hours every day reading anything he could get his hands on, from history books to science magazines. He really loved reading about history and science, especially physics. His mom would bring him new books almost every week, and he read them all. Sometimes, he would read the same book multiple times just to understand everything in it. This time spent reading and learning by himself actually helped him later in life. All this knowledge came in handy when he started working in the pawn shop business and making deals with customers. His deep understanding of history, which started during those lonely days in bed, would later help him spot fake items and know the true value of historical pieces that came into his shop. While Rick was dealing with being sick, his family was having money problems too. The Harrisons used to work in real estate, but in the 1980s, their business fell apart. The economy was really bad then. House loan rates went up to 18%, which meant nobody was buying houses. This money crisis almost made the family go bankrupt. In 1981, when they had almost no money left, the Harrison family decided to move to Las Vegas, Nevada, to try to start over. They packed everything they owned into a small U-Haul truck and drove across the country, hoping to find better opportunities in the city known for second chances. They only had $5,000 saved up, which wasn't much even back then. They used this money to open a small shop that bought and sold gold and silver. The shop was tiny, not at all like the big famous place you see on TV today. It was in a rough part of town, and the building needed lots of repairs. Starting a pawn shop was risky, especially in Las Vegas, where there were already many other pawn shops, but they felt they had to try something to make money for the family. Rick's father, Richard, spent their last few $100s on a sign for the store, hoping it would help bring in customers. Rick started helping in the shop when he was still a teenager, but many people don't know how hard those early days really were. He would wake up at 5:30 every morning to help his dad open the shop, often working until late at night. They couldn't afford to hire any employees back then, so Rick had to learn every part of the business. He learned how to test gold and silver, how to spot fake jewelry, and how to deal with all kinds of customers, from friendly folks who just needed a quick loan to dangerous people trying to sell stolen goods. The neighborhood where they first opened the shop was pretty rough. They got robbed 3 times in their first year. After the third robbery, Rick and his dad took turns sleeping in the back of the shop with a shotgun to protect their inventory. They couldn't afford a good security system yet, so they had to do everything themselves. Rick says those scary nights taught him more about business than any book ever could. During the day, Rick would study every item that came into the shop. He'd read books about antiques during slow times, and he'd talk to every expert who came through the door, trying to learn as much as he could. He kept detailed notes about everything he learned in a series of notebooks. He still has those notebooks today. though most of them are falling apart from years of use. One of the hardest parts was learning how to negotiate. Rick made a lot of mistakes at first, either paying too much for items or not offering enough, which made customers angry. His dad would sometimes have to step in and fix Rick's deals. But Rick kept learning, kept watching how his dad handled customers, and eventually became even better at making deals than his father. These early hard times helped make Rick Harrison into someone who wouldn't give up easily. Having health problems and money problems when he was young taught him to work hard and understand the real value of money, time, and not giving up. Being able to get through these hard times and being willing to take risks helped make the gold and silver pawn shop successful and led to creating Pawn Stars. Even with all these problems, Rick and his dad Richard kept working hard, trying to be honest and fair with customers. Their shop became known for having all kinds of interesting things, from regular pawned items to rare collector's items and historical stuff. This good reputation helped make their business grow. The biggest change for the gold and silver pawn shop happened in 2009, when the History Channel started filming Pawn Stars there. But getting on TV wasn't as simple as it might seem. Rick had spent years trying to get a TV show made about the shop. He kept sending videos to TV channels, showing them all the interesting things that happened in the shop every day. Most channels said no, but Rick didn't give up. He made about 20 different videos over 4 years before someone finally said yes. The TV show makers from History Channel really liked all the interesting and weird items that came through the shop, and they liked watching the Harrison family work together and deal with customers. They especially liked how Rick could tell stories about history while making deals, teaching viewers something new with each item that came into the shop. Making Pawn Stars wasn't as easy as it looks on TV. When they first started filming, nobody in the family knew anything about making a TV show. They had to learn everything from scratch. The first few episodes took forever to film because they kept making mistakes, looking at the camera when they weren't supposed to, forgetting what they were going to say, or talking too quietly for the microphones to pick up. The TV crew had to make a lot of changes to the shop just to film there. They installed special lights all over the ceiling and had to create a separate area for filming because the regular shop was too noisy. They also had to teach all the regular customers not to stare at the cameras or try to get on TV. Some days, they would film for 10 or 12 hours just to get enough good footage for one episode. Rick had to learn how to be natural on camera, which was harder than he expected. He would practice explaining things at home, talking to a mirror for hours to get better at describing items in an interesting way. His sons Corey and Adam used to make fun of him for this, but it helped him become better at being on TV. The show also changed how the shop did business. Before filming each episode, they had to make sure they had enough interesting items to show on camera. Sometimes, they would spend weeks looking for unique things to buy, just so they would have good stuff to film. They also had to be more careful about who they let sell things on camera. They needed people who were interesting and could talk well on TV. The success of the show brought new challenges too. Some people would try to sell fake items just to get on TV. Others would come to the shop and cause problems, hoping to get famous. The shop had to hire security guards just to handle all the crazy fans who would show up hoping to meet Rick or the other guys from the show. When Pawn Stars got popular, the gold and silver pawn shop completely transformed. The tiny shop that once struggled to stay open now had lines of people waiting outside every day. They had to hire more staff just to handle all the customers. They started selling more than just gold and silver. They had old toys that could be worth thousands of dollars, sports items signed by famous athletes, rare comic books, historic documents, and even pieces from famous movies. Some days, more than 5,000 people would visit the shop, just hoping to catch a glimpse of Rick or one of the other stars from the show. Tour buses started making regular stops at the shop, and it became one of the most visited places in Las Vegas, right up there with the famous casinos. The shop had to change how it did business too. They hired experts in different fields, people who knew about old guns, rare coins, antique furniture, and other special items. They built a special room just for filming the TV show, because the regular shop got too crowded with tourists. They even opened a gift shop next door where people could buy t-shirts, coffee mugs, and other stuff with the Pawn Stars logo on it. Rick said later that he never imagined their little pawn shop would become such a big tourist attraction. The story of how the gold and silver pawn shop grew shows how not giving up when things are hard can lead to success. Starting from almost nothing when they were desperate for money to becoming known all over the world, the shop shows how the Harrison family worked hard and didn't give up. Today, the gold and silver pawn shop continues to be one of the most famous pawn shops in the world. The shop now makes more money from tourism and TV show merchandise than it does from actual pawn business. On busy days, you might see more than 4,000 people come through just to take pictures and buy souvenirs. They have a whole team of security guards just to manage the crowds, and they've had to create special rules for people who want to be on TV. Even though Rick Harrison doesn't work there full-time anymore, he still comes in for special occasions and to film new episodes. The shop has become more than just a business. It's a symbol of the American dream. It shows how someone can start with almost nothing, work really hard, learn everything they can, and build something amazing. Rick often tells young entrepreneurs who visit the shop, if a kid with epilepsy who dropped out of high school can build this, anybody can succeed if they work hard enough. The shop now has more than 50 employees, including experts in all kinds of collectibles. They have people who know about old coins, comic books, ancient artifacts, and pretty much anything else you can think of. They even offer tours of the shop, where guides tell stories about the most interesting items they've ever bought and the strangest things people have tried to sell them. But even with all this success, Rick says he sometimes misses the old days when it was just a regular pawn shop. Back then, it was more personal, he says. We knew all our customers by name. Now it's different. But different isn't always bad. We've just had to learn how to change with the times. Personal life and court problems. Rick Harrison's personal life has had lots of ups and downs, with several marriages, divorces, and big court fights that affected both his family and his business. Rick Harrison has been married 4 times. He first married Kim, and they had 2 sons, Corey and Adam. They got divorced in 1985, and Rick married his second wife, Tracy, very quickly after that in 1986. Tracy helped raise Rick's sons Corey and Adam from his first marriage, but this marriage also ended in divorce in 2011. In 2013, Rick married his third wife, Deanna Burdett. This seemed like it would work out at first, and Rick became stepdad to her 3 daughters. But their relationship got worse over time, and they got divorced in 2020. Not many people noticed this divorce because it happened during the George Floyd protests, when everyone was focused on that instead. In 2021, Rick married his 4th wife, Amanda Palmer, hoping things would be better this time. But Rick still had personal problems and court fights that made his life complicated. One of the biggest and most public court fights in Rick Harrison's life started in 2022, when his own mother, Joanne Harrison, sued him. This fight was about who owned and controlled the gold and silver pawn shop, which had made the Harrison family rich and famous. Joanne Harrison said Rick had made her sign over her 51% ownership of the pawn shop to him while she was getting better from being in a coma in the early 2000s. She said she didn't really understand what she was signing because she was sick then. Joanne's lawsuit also said Rick wasn't showing her important money information about the business, including records about more than $500,000 in cash and silver that belonged to her husband Richard Harrison, who had died. Joanne wanted to get back control of her part of the pawn shop and wanted to see all the records about what the business owned. Things got worse when Joanne got a court order to stop Rick from selling any family property or doing anything that might make her part of the business worth less. This court fight shocked fans and showed that the family wasn't as happy together as they seemed on TV. Rick said these accusations weren't true and thought other people were trying to use his mother for their own benefit. He was confused and sad about the whole thing, which hurt his once close relationship with his mother. The court fight with his mother really hurt Rick Harrison's public image. Fans of Pawn Stars, who had always thought Rick was good at business and cared about family, started to wonder if he was really like that. The case showed how running a family business can be really hard, especially when it involves money and control. Even with these problems, Rick is still important in the pawn shop business and still appears on Pawn Stars. But the court fights and losing family members have definitely affected him, both in his personal life and his work. These problems show that even very successful people can have serious family problems. Adam Harrison, son of Pawn Stars star Rick Harrison, lived quietly. Unlike his father and brother Corey, his life was hard, and it ended very sadly. Adam was Rick Harrison's second son and Corey Harrison's younger brother. Unlike Corey, who became very famous on Pawn Stars, Adam chose to stay out of the spotlight. He sometimes worked at the family's gold and silver pawn shop, but mostly stayed away from TV cameras and public attention. Some people say Adam might have worked as a plumber, but nobody knows for sure. Adam had some hard times as he got older. Friends said he struggled to find his place in life, living in the shadow of his famous family. In 2023, he got in trouble with the law and spent 3 months in jail. Nobody knows exactly why he went to jail, but reports say Adam had a hard time after he got out. The time in jail seemed to change him. Friends who knew him said he wasn't the same person anymore. He had trouble sleeping, couldn't keep a steady job, and started staying away from his family more and more. Some people who knew him said he felt lost and didn't know how to ask for help. Police reports and people who knew Adam paint a scary picture of his last months alive. He started acting very strangely, doing things that worried everyone around him. One time, he blocked himself in a guest house with furniture, refusing to come out for 3 days. He would sometimes talk about people following him, even though no one was there. His neighbors said they would hear him arguing with himself late at night. He stopped answering phone calls from his family and wouldn't open his door when they came to check on him. His brother Corey tried several times to get him help, even offering to pay for treatment, but Adam wouldn't accept it. He kept saying he was fine and just needed time to figure things out. The people who lived near him said Adam would sometimes sit in his car for hours, just staring ahead, like he was lost in his own world. All these things showed that his mind wasn't well, which really worried the people who knew and loved him. A close friend of Adam's later told reporters that in the weeks before his death, Adam had talked about wanting to get clean and start over. He had even looked into some treatment programs and had made plans to move to a different state for a fresh start. But sadly, he never got the chance to make those changes. The saddest part of Adam Harrison's life came in January 2024, when he died at age 39 from taking too many drugs. The Clark County coroner said he died from taking fentanyl and methamphetamine together. This sad event shows how bad the fentanyl death crisis is in the United States, where tens of thousands of people die every year. After losing Adam, Rick changed in ways that even his closest friends noticed. He started spending more time alone, often sitting in his office looking through old family photos. He would come to the shop less often, and when he did come in, he wasn't as chatty and friendly as he used to be. The happy, joking Rick that everyone knew from TV seemed to disappear for a while. Rick started seeing a grief counselor, something he never thought he would do. He told friends that talking about his feelings wasn't something he was comfortable with, but he knew he needed help dealing with his son's death. He also started attending support groups for parents who had lost children to drug overdoses. At first, he just sat and listened to other parents' stories, but eventually, he started sharing his own experiences too. The tragedy made Rick take a hard look at his life and his relationships with his other children. He started spending more time with his remaining kids, especially his son Corey. They would have dinner together several times a week, something they hadn't done in years. Rick also tried to be more open about his feelings with his family, telling them he loved them more often, and talking about important things instead of just business. Rick's wife Amanda was a huge help during this time. She would make sure he ate properly and got enough sleep, and she went with him to all his counseling sessions. She also helped him start going through Adam's things, which was incredibly hard for Rick to do. They found old school projects, birthday cards, and even some poems Adam had written when he was younger. Rick kept everything in a special box in his office. The hardest part for Rick was dealing with the guilt. He kept wondering if he could have done more to help Adam, if he had missed signs that his son was in trouble. His counselor helped him understand that addiction is a disease and that Adam's death wasn't his fault. But Rick still has days when he struggles with these feelings. Adam Harrison's death shows how people can have serious problems even if they're part of a famous and successful family. It also shows how dangerous the opioid crisis is, especially fentanyl, which can kill someone even in very small amounts. Adam's death really hurt the Harrison family and shows how big problems can exist behind the scenes of fame and success. After Adam died from taking fentanyl and methamphetamine, Rick posted on social media about how sad he was and how much he loved his son. On Instagram, he shared a picture of himself and Adam, writing, "You will always be in my heart. I love you, Adam." Many fans, friends, and famous people like Donald Trump Jr. sent messages saying they were sorry about Adam's death. After Adam's death, Rick became very serious about fighting against fentanyl and drug addiction. He started working with local groups in Las Vegas that help people with drug problems. He would spend his own money to help people get into treatment programs. Sometimes, when someone would come into the shop looking rough and obviously dealing with addiction, Rick would take them aside and talk to them privately, offering to help them get treatment. Rick also started going to schools to talk to kids about the dangers of drugs, especially fentanyl. He would tell them about Adam, showing them pictures of his son when he was healthy and happy, and then explaining how drugs destroyed his life. These talks were really hard for Rick. He would often have to stop speaking because he would get too emotional, but he kept doing it because he believed that if he could save even one life, it would be worth it. He worked with local politicians too, trying to get them to pass stronger laws against fentanyl dealers. He went to city council meetings and spoke to state representatives. He even went to Washington, D.C. to talk to Congress about the problem. Rick used his fame from porn stars to get attention for this issue, doing interviews on news shows and writing articles for newspapers. Rick also set up a foundation in Adam's name to help families affected by drug addiction. The foundation helps pay for treatment programs and also supports families who have lost someone to drugs. They provide counseling, help with funeral costs, and even help people find jobs after they get clean. Rick puts a lot of his own money into this foundation, and he spends many hours working on it, even though it's emotionally draining for him. At the pawn shop, Rick put up posters with information about drug addiction and where to get help. He made sure all his employees knew about local treatment programs so they could help any customers who might need it. He even started a program where people could trade valuable items for drug treatment instead of cash, something that had never been done at a pawn shop before. While Rick has talked publicly about fighting against fentanyl and its dangers, he also asked people to let his family have privacy during this hard time. Losing a child is incredibly hard for any parent, and Rick has made it clear his family is having a very hard time dealing with their sadness. Laura Herlovich, who speaks for the Harrison family, confirmed they were very sad and wanted privacy while dealing with this painful time. Even though Rick's life is very public because of Pawn Stars, he hasn't shared too much about his deeper feelings and how Adam's death has affected him. But it's clear this loss has hit him very hard, adding to other personal problems he's had, including his father Richard Harrison's death in 2018 and the court fights with his mother. How Rick has dealt with all these sad things shows that even though he seems tough and happy on TV, these personal losses have really affected him. He still works, but not as much, and tries to help others by talking about important issues, which shows he's trying to find some meaning in these hard experiences. Even while dealing with his sadness, Rick Harrison still does some work and appears in public, but he's more careful about what he does. He doesn't work full-time at the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop anymore, instead focusing on specific projects like Pawn Stars Do America, where he still shares what he knows about history and collectibles. What do you think about Rick's story? Do you believe his court battle with his mother was justified? Or do you think there's more to the story? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on more fascinating stories like this. Oh, and before you go, click on the video on the screen right now to see what happened right before Elon Musk's wife divorced him. You won't believe it.